Hey, how's it going? So today we're going to kind of do a quick start video, and yes, this is a little bit different than the videos I normally post on this channel, but I've been getting a lot of questions about it. We're going to look at meshtastic. Basically, in a nutshell, let me stop myself right there because I get distracted and never finish explaining this. Meshtastic is an off-grid text-based communication system. Basically, you set up little tiny single board computers like ESP32s and some other specific hardware, and they allow you to use the around 800 and 900 megahertz radio frequency and chirp spread spectrum to send messages back and forth. It's a giant mesh network. Every device that's on it contributes and forwards messages on, but basically it allows you to communicate using your smartphone or a standalone device that does not have internet. There's no infrastructure other than these little devices. No cellular is required, nothing like that. It's off-grid communications. It is little tiny single board computers, which can look like this, or like this, or like this, or many other types of hardware, standalone devices, stuff that works with your phone, but it's an off-grid communication system. Basically, these things operate on the chirp spread spectrum, roughly LoRaWAN, around 915 megahertz, depending on where you're at in the world. It's usually between 800 and 920, somewhere in there. But the plan is to show you how to set up a few of these devices, basic configuration, and I've got a few random thoughts along the way. So we've got a few different devices here. I'm going to start with probably the most ubiquitous and one of the cheaper ones that's out there. These things are made by Heltec Automation. It's a LoRa 32 development board. This one is 863 to 928 megahertz, so this will allow you to use it pretty much anywhere in the world. Meshtastic has different frequency groups depending on where you live. Now, the way most of these work, this one here, it's a little tiny, like Arduino-looking development board. This one I've already modified with a slightly larger Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna. But these things are intended to be powered from a battery or USB-C, and then you connect to it via your smartphone using Bluetooth. Now, the connection to your phone is only Bluetooth. It doesn't require your phone to be on internet. You don't have to have a cell plan or anything like that. And these things can hop onto the mesh network, and you can send messages back and forth to each other at kind of surprising distances. But they come in a kit, something like this. You get the little board. There's an antenna. Then you've got some GPIO pin headers you can use if you're working on other projects. And depending on the kit you buy, some of them may also come with an external antenna adapter. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But this particular kit comes with the board and one of these little generic injection molded cases. And these things just kind of slide in here. You line up your USB-C port and it pushes down into place. Before we do that though, we're going to attach the antenna. The main thing with all of these, they do have protections built in, but it's best not to power these things up unless you have an antenna connected. That's just good practice with any sort of radio frequency stuff in general. But this thing has an itty bitty SMA connector down here on the side. I think you can see that. And then our antenna has a connector that goes on there. Basically, you just kind of line these up carefully, and it's not going to take a whole lot of force, but once you get it on there, it'll kind of click into place. There we go. That's snapped in, and you can kind of give it a little wiggle, and it seems to be attached. Then we can line this thing up and get it put in the case. Just kind of line up the USB-C port there. Make sure your antenna doesn't get caught and pop off there. So I'm going to route it down like this. Then we'll line this up, kind of pushes down in there, and our internal antenna goes in like that. And then the case just kind of snaps on. Now, I've noticed most of these injection molded cases, the lower button for whatever reason is kind of stuck. So you'll want to kind of work these buttons a little bit to free up the plastic. I think you can see here on this bottom edge, there's a little bit of over injection on the plastic molding there. So just make sure those move freely, and then you can snap this thing on here like so. And this is basically ready to flash and get set up on a computer. Now, depending on where you bought these things from, they may come with software already flashed on them. My recommendation is to always reflash your own software and completely erase it. I'll show you that here in a minute. There was a bit of an issue on earlier versions of these things, and also some of the companies that sell them, just flashing the exact same software on. and there was a problem with the encryption keys being identical across a bunch of them. There is still another glitch with that we may encounter along the way, but the best way to do this is going to be to completely erase it and start over. Now, the flashing process is pretty simple. You'll need a Chromium-based web browser, one that supports USB to serial on the web page or whatever that's called. So we're going to plug this in here, and you'll see it's going to power up. This one already has the firmware flashed on it, but we're going to go through the process, and I'll show you how to completely erase this and start over again. Here's the computer this thing is plugged into, so we're going to open up Chrome here, and then we're going to go to flasher.meshtastic.org. They've streamlined the process pretty well for flashing this thing. Basically, you'll just click on your target device, and this is a Heltec V3. They have a little list. Sorry, this is really small. I'm unable to make it bigger for Windows reasons, but anyways, along the top here, they have different brands. So we're going to click on the Heltec one, and then this is a Heltec V3. So we will click on that. Then there's a confusing part here with firmwares. The stable firmware, they actually call beta, and unstable is alpha. But usually by default, it's going to pre-select the most recent stable or beta firmware, which we'll just call it beta because it's not stable. I mean, it usually works, but there's still some bugs. So you just click on this, and then it's going to be down here kind of in the middle. So we'll just click on that. It was already selected. Then we'll go over here and click on Flash. And it's going to tell you a whole bunch of stuff about everything. Just scroll down here, hit Continue. And then for a brand new device, like I was saying earlier, I always recommend to do a full flash erase and install. That way, anything that's on there is completely removed, because you can update the firmware on these and have it still retain the settings. So we don't know where these things came from. We don't know about the encryption keys. We want everything to be fresh. So we're going to click this little button here that says full flash. It gives you a warning about backing up stuff. We're starting from scratch, so that doesn't matter. So we'll hit erase flash and install. And it appears as though our device is not showing up here. Let's go into our device manager here. It is entirely possible that we don't have the drivers for this on there. And yep, there we go. CP2102 USB to UART bridge controller does not have a driver. So we're just going to open up another tab here and use the old Google. Just something generic. meshtastic heltec serial drivers. And then they should have a link here. Yeah, so these are ESP32 based devices. The NRF52s, we're going to talk about one of those later. They're a little bit different, but we can click on that. And I'm going to put links to all this stuff down below in case you need it. So CP21X to USB UART, that's what it was in Device Manager. So we can click on that one. And it takes us over here to Silicon Labs. And this website's always a little weird, but you just click on Downloads, and then the top one here for Windows Universal. If you've ever messed with Arduinos or ESP32s in general, you'll probably already have these drivers installed. But we'll just open this up, and we've got everything here. Actually, I guess we need to extract this. All right, that is all extracted. So we're going to go back into Device Manager, and we will update the driver on this thing. Update driver, browse my computer, let me pick, next, have disk, browse. Windows makes Windows noises. Go to the desktop. Actually, it was under downloads. Where's downloads on this thing? There we go. Then we'll go to this folder and just hit open, and it should figure out what it needs to know. There we go. Next. Going to do its thing. Close. And you can see now the little exclamation mark is gone. So let's go back to our web flasher here. And let's do erase and flash again. And there we go. You may have a number of different devices in this list. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell, but in this case, we know it's the CP2102 USB to UART bridge. COM port doesn't really matter, but you may have a few different things and you may have to try different ones to get it to work, but just look for something that relates to that device. So we'll hit connect, and here you go. You can see it's off and running down at the bottom. We're erasing the flash. This may take a while, but anyways, we're going to let this complete, and then we will jump into the setup on a phone. Then we're going to go over a couple of other devices here, because they do make a lot of products, and you can do device tracking, like GPS-based stuff. You can stick a little tracker card on something and figure out where it's at. But depending on your location, there may be more adoption versus not. And sometimes in different areas, they use slightly different settings and different channels and whatnot. So it's usually good to see if you can find a Discord server for your area for meshtastic, something like that. And you can chat with people and figure out what settings everyone's using there. As this is completing here, though, there's kind of two main uses for these. There's a public channel, which is just like a giant old school IRC like chat room where everyone that's on your local mesh can talk to each other and just chat, be like, hey, what's up, how's it going, or spam the crap out of everything, you know, whatever. But you can set up private channels, and these are all encrypted, of course, and you put that channel information onto another device, then you're able to privately communicate between devices that have that channel installed or those encryption keys installed. The cool thing with Meshtastic is every single device, usually, I mean, you can change configuration, but every device participates in the mesh. So this little device over here, say I'm just going to plug that in and hang it in my window. That thing will help with the mesh and it'll retransmit messages. It can rebroadcast messages that it does not have the keys to, which is cool. It's kind of a zero trust arrangement. So if there's other people around that don't have your private channels, their equipment can still help facilitate the messages moving all over the place and getting transmitted to whoever needs to receive them without actually reading or decrypting them, which is sort of neat. And it appears as though flashing is complete. There we go, it says right there. So we can just close this little sub window here, and let's go back over to the, let's go back over to the device, and I'll show the app setup process. You can see here we've got the display on. It says Meshtastic, and it shows the device identifier on there. And then also it's telling me to set the region using the app. Now, it is possible to communicate with these things through your computer or through Wi-Fi, but I don't think we're going to cover that in this video. There's a bunch of caveats to all of that stuff. But the one super annoying thing is the apps look completely different on Android versus iOS. Like, I got super familiar on the iPhone originally, and then I set up a friend with it, and he had the Android phone, and everything was completely different. So we're going to go through the initial setup on an iPhone, and then I'll show you some of the different stuff on the Android side as well. All right, so you want to download the Meshtastic app. It's got this little green mountain looking thing. So we'll go in here. Welcome to Meshtastic, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever, permissions. Sure, you can have, yeah, critical alerts, that's fine. So they finally have a flow now that doesn't automatically make your phone start sharing your position, like GPS position. But other devices like this, for example, that have a built-in GPS, these will immediately broadcast your location publicly to the mesh. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll configure location permissions, local network access, that's fine. And got to configure Bluetooth, that's fine. All right. Now you can see here we have a device that's popped up, unknown BLE. So we're going to tap on that. Then right here on the screen, we're going to have the Bluetooth pairing code. That'll pop up automatically. So we will type that in. And this, by default, is randomly generated every time you set up one of these devices. I'll hit pair. Then it's going to come up with a big old thing saying, hey, you need to set your radio settings before you do anything else. There we go. Set LoRa region. So we'll tap on that. And then up here where it says region, we will go to United States. Then there's another thing called MQTT where you can send the mesh through the internet. I think that's kind of defeating the purpose of this, so I usually turn on ignore MQTT, and then all the other defaults are fine. Presets is long range fast. There's a bunch of different modes. Transmit enabled, obviously you want that on. So we're going to hit save. Usually after you change any configuration, the device has to restart. So you can see there it says rebooting and we've disconnected. Depending on your phone and a bunch of other factors, it may automatically reconnect when it comes back up, but you can see the reboot pretty quickly. And there we go, the phone sees it. Now here's another glitch. It may show you need to set the region again. Once the thing's connected, just let it sit for like 10 seconds or so. It'll stabilize and that should go away. A few more settings we need to change though. So we're going to go into settings here and then security. And even though we just reinstalled this from scratch, I still like to regenerate the keys. So you can see your public key and private key. This works like standard encryption. But what I want to do is hit regenerate private key. And on iPhones, it just does it with no warning, but you'll see faintly in the background here they're changing. So just press that 1 or 2 times, whatever, hit save. And I don't, yeah, it has to reboot again for that. If you go over here to the connection tab, you can watch the status of that. All right, that's back. Now, the name of this thing is meshtastic A524. That is based on the hardware IDs, or the MAC, if you will, the MAC address of this device. And the last 4 digits of that, the A524, will always be at the end of whatever username you choose. But we can change this. We just go into user here, and then you have 2 options. There's long name and short name. Long name can kind of be whatever you want. Short name is going to be 4 characters. So long name, let's just go in here. Apparently we have to delete all this. We'll go long name. We'll do super awesome autocorrect. It doesn't matter if there's spaces. Super awesome thing. And then short name, I'm just going to call it thing. We'll do it in all caps. Oh, that's too many letters. We'll just do... Oh, I guess you can only do emoji or text. So actually here, we'll just make it the eyeballs. There. Save. Save configuration. I don't remember if it has to reboot. Yep, reboots on this one. There's like maybe 1 or 2 settings. Ah, here we go. So this is the warning I was telling you about. It says remote device super awesome thing has advertised your public key. This may indicate a low entropy key and you may need to generate your public keys. That is a glitch that still exists whenever you change your username. We already changed the encryption keys, so it doesn't matter. You can safely ignore that. That's why it's one of the first things I do. Okay, so we are set up with the username. You can go into a bunch of other stuff like Bluetooth also. I usually like to go in and change it to a fixed pin. That way if you can't see the screen, you know, you can change it to a 6-digit pin that makes it easier for pairing. You can go into display. You can tell it. Now, a lot of this isn't going to apply, like always point north and some other stuff like that. But I'm going to change the display units to imperial. And then screen on time is set for 10 minutes. I'm going to set that to, I guess, 1 minute. And then the screen will automatically turn off. And there's some other stuff in here that doesn't really apply to these, so we'll save that again. And there you can see, super awesome thing. And then you've got some little eyeballs here. So if we go into the node list, like I was saying, this thing is going to automatically retransmit any messages that it sees with this particular setting. But all the other devices like this out there will, every so often, you can change the interval, but every so often they will broadcast their existence. So as we sit here and time goes on, we're going to see more and more of these devices show up. So you can see the long name, super awesome thing, and then the eyeballs there. So this list is going to start filling out with some more devices as time goes on. And then if we go over to messages here and then channels, the primary channel, which is actually long fast, apparently it's still called primary. I'm going to go into settings and then channels and then primary channel. Positions enabled. We're going to turn that off. Any telemetry or position data, this is where stuff starts getting really confusing. And they've tried to change some of the terminology to make it less confusing, but of course that made it more confusing because it invalidated all of the previous documentation that exists. But anyways, the default channel name is long fast. Long fast, all one word. L and F is capitalized. Not sure if that really matters, but we're going to do that. Key size shows default, and the long fast channel key, which will auto-populate, is capital AQ ==, and then primary channel. So we're going to save that. It does not need to reboot for this. Most data on your mesh is sent over the primary channel. You can set up secondary channels. Okay, so they added a little information block about that, so that's kind of cool. Now if we go into channels, long fast, and we can just be like, hey, what's up? And in theory, if anyone else is around, like see it says waiting to be acknowledged, if something else around here picks it up, that should change to delivered or acknowledged or something like that. Okay, so max retransmission reached. Let's go back into our settings and make sure our radio settings are correct. So LoRa, United States, ignore MQTT. Okay, that's fine. Oh, a number of hops here. There's a lot of controversy with this and how you should use the setting. It really depends on your location where you live and how busy the mesh is. I usually set mine to 5. just around here. I've actually moved on from meshtastic though. I'm using MeshCORE instead, but that's another topic for another video. But basically, when this thing sends a message, it has 5 hops attached to it. So it jumps to another device, and then when that device retransmits it, it reduces 1 of those hops, goes on to the next device, removes another hop, and so on and so forth, until it's gone to basically 6 different devices if you count this one. But anyways, let's go back to messages, and we will retry this. There's a good chance the antenna connector on this one, there we go, acknowledged. Holding the antennas vertically makes a big difference on these two, so some device out there somewhere has acknowledged this message was received. So anyways, I'm going to show the flashing process on the NRF style boards. Then we're going to get both phones, and I'll show you how the channel arrangement works when you're trying to share channels. It gets a little bit convoluted and confusing, but yeah. Oh, one thing I should mention that's fairly important is client mode. So if we go into settings and then device, you can see here device role. So the roles basically. By default, client is enabled. And what that does is it's basically a device that connects to your phone via Bluetooth, and it retransmits all messages. If you're going to leave this thing plugged into the wall, that's fine. You can just do that. It'll participate in the mesh and everything will be good. If you're using something like this that may use a little more power and has a GPS in it, and you want the battery life to be as long as possible, you would set this to client mute. And what that does is you can send and receive messages, but it does not participate in retransmitting messages from other people. And that saves your battery power quite a bit on a device like this. So client mute. We've got a bunch of other stuff in here, client hidden, tracker, lost and found sensor. What you do not want to use on meshtastic in 99.9% of the cases is repeater or router. Those can cause major problems on the mesh, because when the messages are moving around, before these things retransmit, they pause for a brief moment and see if any other devices have retransmitted the message, and if it has, they shut up. Router, it cuts in line, always retransmits it. So we get a lot of collisions and the data being sent everywhere, causes all kinds of problems. Repeater and router is like if you're somewhere literally on the top of a mountain or a hill and there's no other nodes anywhere around and you're trying to link 2 towns or something like that, then you would use that mode. But yeah, don't use repeater or router. If you feel like you really want to do something like that and you're high up on a hill, but there are other people around in the little valley, you could use router late. What that does is it still retransmits, but it takes a second just like these do, and it will see if anything else has rebroadcast it first. But usually client is going to be the setting you want for most cases. All right, let's grab another device here. I'm going to leave this thing plugged into power though while we do this to see if we get any other devices showing up. Also, if the Bluetooth connection on your phone to that device drops out, but it's still powered, it does have some internal memory. So any messages or anything that come through will show up on your app when you reconnect with Bluetooth. All right, one of the other more popular devices, these are typically used for people that are going to run giant antennas or medium-sized antennas, kind of like this. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention, this is for some MeshCORE testing I've been doing, but this is another one of those heltec V3 devices, but it has a little MakerHot case and a battery inside of it, which is pretty cool. And then these things have the little adapter here, so you can screw on bigger antennas, kind of like this. A lot of times these devices, depending on where you get them, will come with an antenna like this, which is like, meh, okay, whatever. These things are a lot better and can transmit a lot further, and anything is going to be better than this. But instead of snapping on this guy when you set up your board, you can put on this thing, and it's got a little connector that screws into this antenna. But these particular cases are designed for that connector to stick out the top. And then in this case, I've just used a cable and an adapter to go to one of these Amazon special 5.8 dBi gain antennas for some testing purposes. But you can get the little kits with a battery, which is pretty cool. Also, with all of the ESP boards, this top button here scrolls through different options, and then the bottom button, like any ESP32 device, will always reset the device no matter what's going on. So you can see, you press that and you can see this thing's rebooting. But yeah, I'll put links to a bunch of this stuff down below. But if you want to set up a device on the hill and kind of help link some areas together, you can use one of these things. This is a RAKwireless block, like starter kit, I think they call it. These are sort of a little modular board, and you can plug in different modules and whatnot to them. So this is the little board here, and the entire LoRaWAN module is this part here. You can get displays that snap on here, you can get GPS units, a whole bunch of other things that'll attach here. This thing also has a port on it, so you can use one of these little JST connectors to plug in an 18650. And then also, there's a solar input. The only trick with these solar inputs on these particular boards is you can only go up to 5 volts with them. So it kind of limits... oh, I should grab... hopefully I remember. I've got another little portable solar node that I built. I'll have to grab that from outside. But you're kind of limited to the solar panels you can use on that. These devices are also significantly lower power. These things will last for weeks on an 18650 sometimes. Whereas the heltec devices, these things running on... you might get a day and a half out of an 18650. But the little, like, you know, 1100 milliamp hour pouch cell LiPo in here won't last overnight. The heltec V3s use significantly more power, but these are nice and low power. So I'm doing some testing with some little solar panels like this. These are 5 volts and only 200 milliamps output. Right now I've got one of them outside in the worst possible conditions where it only gets sunlight for maybe 5 hours a day and then a little bit of ambient light over the rest of the day. And I'm testing to see if one of these devices and a single 18650 can operate continually with a panel this small. So kind of testing with that. Something like this, though, won't power a device like this. These actually use quite a bit of power. Oh, something else I should mention, too. These things do have battery charging capability built in, which makes sense with that other one that comes with a kit. On the back here, there's a little, I think it's a JST 1.5 connector right here. And if you plug in a rechargeable lithium battery into this, it will automatically charge when it's plugged into USB. And this, hang on, I need to plug a load into this battery because it keeps turning off. It's one of those smart batteries. Hang on, where am I? So it does use more power, but it's not enough to keep some smart battery banks awake, apparently. 300 milliamp draw. There we go. That should keep the battery awake and keep this thing going. All right, so the heltec ESP nodes, those have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and LoRaWAN. These things only have Bluetooth and LoRaWAN. There is a way to get a Wi-Fi module for these, but it's not compatible with meshtastic. So depends on what you're doing. It's kind of some more advanced stuff if you need to have Wi-Fi. But it's got a USB-C port, a single button, and then a couple of LED lights. This thing you definitely do not want to power up without the antennas connected. It comes with these two little stupid PCB antennas, and they are labeled. This one's BLE antenna, kind of looks like a T, and then this is the LoRa antenna. So again, before we plug it in, we want to make sure the antennas are attached. So I'm going to do that here real quick, and they are labeled on here. It says LoRa and BLE. Let me get these things snapped on here. Now, the internal structure of these things are a little bit different with how the storage and everything works. These use what's called a DFU mode for firmware updates, where when you plug it into the computer, it'll actually mount as a drive on the machine. It doesn't always do it. Sometimes you got to click this button to get it to work. But recently, I think with the newer firmwares and the newer meshtastic flasher, we shouldn't have to worry about that. But it also comes with a USB-C cable, one of these adapters to screw in an antenna like this, a little rubber duck antenna as I call it, and 1,000 itty-bitty screws. Usually I've got these things mounted in a box, so I 3D print these little carrier boards, and the screws in here allow us to attach this thing to this board, and then that gives us an easy way to mount it. And honestly, so far I've just been kind of hot gluing these things with hot melt black hot glue inside the boxes, and it seems to work pretty well. Anyways, we got both of our antennas connected, so now we're safe to plug this thing into the computer, and I'll show you the flashing process on this. And you can see some little lights going on there. Let's go over to the computer. And back at our flasher. Usually anytime I start another flashing process, I like to refresh the web page just in case there's any remnants of the USB serial connected. But same thing, we're going to do target device. This is a rack, so we'll click on that. Sometimes it's hard to figure out which device it is from the listing you bought it from, but these most common ones are going to be the RAKwireless 4631, or the first one here. So we'll click on that, and then we're going to do the same most recent beta firmware, and then we will hit flash. Now here's where things differ a little bit. Sometimes you can just do this and not push any buttons on that and it'll work, and other times you got to kind of intervene. So we're going to hit continue, and then we'll hit enter DFU mode. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. But we're going to click the button, and you can see here tiny USB serial. So we'll click that and hit connect. Then we'll just give it a minute. And if it does work, we should get another drive mounted on the computer. Oh yeah, there it is. It's a 32 megabyte RAK4631 drive. Oh yeah, it tells you it may have a different name, but shows you what it'll look like. So that's connected. So now we can download the file. So what it does is it downloads a file, and we can open this up here in our downloads folder. But the way this works is we're going to open up that little drive that appeared, and then we're going to copy this file directly over to it. The instant the file is done copying, the drive will just disconnect from the computer. And you may get an error saying, oh, well, if you're on a Mac, it may say, oh, drive disconnected improperly. That's fine, just wait, and it'll be all fine. So we're going to drag this over here, and you should see it start copying. And then this window over here should disappear the instant it's done copying. Once it sees the file transfer is complete, it's going to disconnect from USB and start doing the update. And there we go, window went away. And if we look at the device here, you can see there is a red light on and a green light that has started blinking. So I think that thing should be ready to go now. And usually when these things are on, you'll see the solid red light and then this green light. Actually, both lights will kind of flicker. So let's grab our Android phone here, and we're going to pair this thing up with it. So as you can see, the Android app looks completely different. So we'll hit scan, and we should come up with something on here. I found with the Android app, it's best press a button and just wait. It takes a minute. Okay, so we've got meshtastic A254. That was the other one. So it should be, if you have any other devices, just turn them off and then you can see. But 9865, I believe, is this one. And on these, they don't have a screen, so you can't see what the pin is. On the rack devices, by default, the pin is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then hit OK. Then just give it a minute. You'll see it connect, and then up here, you'll see some numbers and stuff kind of changing once it's actually going. There we go. Syncing up channels, device config. There we go. And here's our device. So Android app's a little different. To get into the settings, I go to the little cloud icon down here, and that refers to connections between the app and devices. And then we've got meshtastic 9865. They don't really delineate different sections on here very well, but we'll go to settings right here. Then we're going to go into LoRa, and we're going to set our region. This one doesn't have the giant red things, but it's kind of hidden right here in the middle. So select a frequency plan, United States, and oh, it looks like they finally changed the frequency slot. Only a couple of you will know what that means, but it's set to 20 by default, so that's good. And then all of the other, oh, we're going to turn on ignore MQTT also. All the other settings here look good. And then you scroll to the bottom and hit send, and the device will reboot. And I think you can see it's disconnected. We've got a little red, I guess the color doesn't come through, but we've got a red cloud there. So this thing will reboot, and then it should reconnect, maybe. Which, that didn't, oh, there we go. Now it's connecting. Like I said, you just got to be patient. Okay, so back into settings again. We're going to go down here to security. And you can see our keys here. We'll hit regenerate private key. This one gives you a warning for some reason, but since it's brand new, you can safely ignore that. Just hit OK. Oh, and apparently it just immediately sends it to the device. Is the public key not showing? Hang on, I'm going to hit regenerate again. Okay, so that's a little different. That should be fine. That's regenerated. So we'll go into device now, and just make sure it's set on client. That's what it should be. Yeah, there we go, client. We have all of our different options there. So that's good. None of this stuff really matters. We don't have a screen. So we'll go to user, and we're going to change the name on this. Cheese with a Z, apparently, doodles. Cheese doodles, there we go. And we will call this fat for no reason, for the short name. Then close the keyboard. Don't get excited, though, when you see this licensed ham operator thing. It doesn't really do you any good, and you can't transmit on ham frequencies with encryption. So just pretend that's not there. Another super advanced thing that I don't think anyone really uses. But we'll hit send. And we're getting that weird error again. Client device says advertised your public key, blah, 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 low entropy. We just changed it. It's fine. Anytime you change the username on the device, you always get that error. I don't know what's up with it, but whatever. Let's go into settings again, and then channels. Oop. This happens a lot too. Sometimes you got to force. Oh, there we go. Sometimes you got to force close the app. Here you can see on the Android side, we've already named the pre-existing public channel long fast. So that's already set. So now let's get our other phone over here. Ah, there we go. Now you can see we've got other nodes in here. Cheese doodles has already shown up. And then we've got a few other random ones here. And these will just kind of populate. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. This list, say here, this one is 5 hops away. So that device is way out in the mesh. Ones where you can see signal bars like this, that means they're actually physically in range of the device, which is kind of cool. So if we see cheese doodles here, we can see we've got good signal. Now, if you go into these, let's see, messages, direct messages, you might think you can send direct messages to each device. The way the flood routing works on meshtastic with the mesh, direct messages are not reliable. I wouldn't try using them. The best thing to do is what we're going to cover now, is create your own channel. First off, though, let's go into channels, long fast. We've got hey, what's up? We'll go into, I think it's a little message icon there. There we go. And then long fast. So now we can be like, baloney. And we can send that. And then it comes up over here. And it'll also kind of show you some semi-useless stuff on the screen. Like you might be able to see the message content on there, but it goes away super quick and it's not really useful. So these two devices are communicating with each other now, but they're only on the public channel. We want to create our own private channel that nobody else can see or go into. This is where things get a little bit confusing, but bear with me here. This is going to kind of be two things in one. We want to make sure we're not accidentally sending out our location, because that happens on the primary channel. Primary channel is actually 0 as far as the software is concerned. Secondary channel's 1, and it kind of goes up from there, but it starts with 0. But the way meshtastic works is all the telemetry data and GPS data and all that always goes out on the primary channel slot. We also want to create a separate encrypted private channel so we can communicate with other people. Now, if you don't actually need to communicate with someone else on a private encrypted channel, it doesn't matter. It's good to have one in your primary slot anyways. That just makes sure that your telemetry data, which is like the specs about your device, the battery voltage, and is that? There we go. Battery voltage, GPS location, all that stuff. It just makes sure it doesn't ever get sent out. What we're going to do is set up one of these phones, and then we're going to use the sharing function or scanning a QR code to get the data over to the other phone. I'm more familiar with the iPhone, so we'll start with that one. Basically, you go into settings and then go down here to channels. And the easiest way I've found to do this is to just tap on long fast and we're going to rename it. So we're going to give it a channel name. So let's just call it secrets. There we go. And capitalization is very important on this. It has to remain the same if both devices are going to communicate. Then the key size, instead of default, we're going to change that to 256-bit. I don't know if this is true, but it feels like when I was using this, doing a 256-bit key seems to transmit and receive better than a 128-bit one. That might have just been random coincidence, but 256-bit is good. And as soon as you do that, I think you can see here it's going to generate a key. I usually just kind of do it randomly a couple of times. So we've got our name, and then we've got our key. We'll hit save. And sometimes on these apps, you have to go back out of the channel settings and back in for it to update. It looks like it updated on this one. But we're going to add long fast, which is the public channel, as our secondary channel. That way we can still communicate with the outside world. So we're going to hit add channel here at the bottom. We're going to give it the name long fast. And it's all one word, no spaces, and the L and the F are capitalized. Oops, to spell it right. Fast. There we go. And we're going to change the key to default, which will be capital A, capital Q, equals, equals. That's the default one. And then secondary is showing there, and allow position request. We'll just leave that off. We'll save that, and now we've got both channels on here. Now, a quick way to configure this phone is to generate a QR code with this one and scan it with this one's camera. The thing to remember is by default, if you just quickly pull up a QR code and don't change any options, it's going to completely erase any channels that may already be on this phone. So when you're sharing channels with people, usually the way I like to do it is I'll text them the secure or the encryption key right here, and then also the name of the channel. Now you gotta be careful when you're texting because some phones capitalize stuff or do autocorrect, but as long as you have that name, the case sensitivity, and this key, you're good to go. But that's a safe way to add it to another phone. Then they can just go in here and let's see. Oh, we gotta go into settings, then channels, then hit the plus down here on Android. Then you can paste in the name and the key and hit save. So that's a safe way to add it without actually screwing up anything. And we'll just cancel out of that. But seeing as how this is a fresh setup and there's nothing we need to save, we'll just do the QR code method. So we're going to go into settings and then share QR code. Now what this is going to do is completely replace by default all the channels on this phone, but it's also going to adjust your radio settings. So it's going to adjust if you're on long fast or medium fast or long short or one of those other presets. It's going to adjust the number of hops and everything else to make them the same. That's a little bit frustrating, but I can understand why they do it. The idea is they want people to be able to share the QR codes and have someone else be part of that channel. But that channel might have different radio settings, and you can only operate in one mode at a time. So if you're on long fast, you can't operate on medium fast, for example. The radios will only handle one mode of operation at a time. And that has to do with the speed of transmission and bandwidth. That's why there's long fast, long short, a bunch of other things like that. But long fast is the default around here. It may be different where you live. So again, checking with a Discord server or some other local information will be handy if you're trying to participate in the community as a whole. But anyways, we have this QR code here. You have an option for replace channels or just add channels. If we do add channels, it's just going to keep the existing ones sometimes. It'll potentially overwrite them depending on what slot they're in, but we're just going to do replace channels, and we've got both of them set here. You can see we've got a green padlock here, which means it's encrypted, and there's a red one with an X through it, which means that's the open public channel. So we're going to open the camera on our Android phone, and obviously you want to have QR code scanning enabled for this to work, but we're going to hold this up here, then we can tap on the link, and then you get an additional confirmation. On Android, it does this. On iOS, it doesn't always. But again, the two apps are in different states. They operate differently, and they're updated at different frequencies. So some of this may be different by the time you see it. But we have two options. We can add. See, there you go. It kind of screws up the order. Or we can replace. But we're just going to replace. So we'll hit accept. Give it a second. Again, with Android, it's hard to tell if you've actually tapped on it because you don't get immediate confirmation all the time. It looks like it's still booted up, so let me hit it again. There we go. Then the device is restarting, and you'll see here it should reconnect in a minute. Now, since this is paired with the phone's Bluetooth, remember we changed the name on this other node, but it's still showing the old name there. If we give it a minute, it should reconnect. Android takes a minute for this. There we go. And actually, just as an aside here, sorry, rabbit trails on rabbit trails. If you need to force close the app, you can do it like that, but you also have to drag down from the top and swipe away any notifications that are there because it'll still be running in the background. But if you want to change that name in your Bluetooth, we can go into our Bluetooth on the phone, and then we can see, is it, see all, there it is, meshtastic 9865. So we can just forget this. Then if we go back into the app and hit scan, it should come up with our new name that we assigned it previously. There we go, FAT. And then the last 4 digits are always going to be appended on the end there, and that's the last 4 of the MAC address or the identifier of the device. So we'll type that in. We didn't change our Bluetooth password, which you should, but it's still going to be the default. So just wait a minute, and it should eventually come up and ask us for the password. There it is. And on the rack modules, once again, that's these guys. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by default. And it's synchronizing, and we're connected. So if we go over to channels here, and channels on this one, you can see there's secrets and there's long fast. Now we should be able to communicate between the two of these. Why, hello there. What? I haven't set up the voice. Oh, well, anyways, that works. It was listening. Okay, stop listening. We'll send that, and then we should get, yeah, you can see it pops up on the screen there. We get an actual notification. And if you have a watch set up, it'll pop up on that too. And there you go. There's all that. And you can see the name is just FAT. And I'll just say, yup. The accessibility settings on my phone kind of screw this up. That's why you can't really see the text there. Waiting to be acknowledged. There we go. And you can see we have the little eyeballs over here for the emoji. Your 4-digit identifier is what is going to show in text message lists, or the emoji if you put that in there. And then if you tap on it, you can actually get the long name. See, super awesome thing and all the details. Once you have your 2 channels set up like this, the most important thing you have to do, I almost forgot about, you have to go in manually and change the frequency slot in your LoRa settings. If you do not do that, you'll only be able to communicate on your private channel and not the public channel. Briefly, the way this works is whatever is in slot 0, or the primary channel, is what dictates the frequency that the entire radio operates on. Now, when your primary channel is long fast, which is the public one, and you're in the United States, that's going to be on what they call frequency 20. By default on iOS, it sets 0 to that field, which is fine, and then the first channel just dictates it. I believe on Android, we learned earlier, it defaults to 20, but I think that setting changes when you modify the primary channel to a different one. So we're going to go into Settings, LoRa, then we're going to scroll down. Now, there is frequency override. You want to ignore that. That has nothing to do with this. What we want is up here where it says frequency slot. You can see it says 0. So we're going to change this to 20. And saving this is the frequency band or range that's used in America. So we'll hit that, we'll hit save, give it a minute to reconnect. We're gonna go over to the Android, and we're gonna go into LoRa also, and let's see what it changed it to. Yeah, so it automatically changed it to frequency slot 39. So that means we're not gonna be able to communicate with long fast. So we're gonna tap on that, and then clear out the 0 and put in 20. Then we'll scroll down and hit send, and then that thing's going to reboot as well. One thing apparently I've just learned today on Android is anytime you mess with the channel names and the primary channel, that frequency slot will automatically reset itself. So you have to go back in there and set it to 20. If you don't do that, nothing's going to work. There's some older documentation that doesn't mention this, and it didn't work that way previously, but that's where the factor that they're constantly updating this stuff comes into play, and it invalidates the old documentation. But if you do that, everything should work. We can test this here. They're both reconnected. So if we go into secrets, we can send a message here, and it should come up. Whoops. Then we will send a message back, and you can see that came up. Let's go over to long fast and spam the crap out of that channel, because that's what everyone does around here. We'll just give it a letter V, send that over, and there you can see it appears on here. What comes after the letter V? M-N-O-P-Q-R-S-T-U-V-W. Send that back. And there we go. You can also notice here, you see this little cloud. That's your status indicator on Android. On iOS, you can see a little check mark now appears in the cloud. On iOS, it'll say acknowledged. But on Android, there'll be an empty cloud while it's trying to send. Then there'll be a check mark in the cloud. If it doesn't send, the cloud will turn red. And then you can tap and hold on the message if it fails, and there'll be an option to retry. Same thing on iOS. You just tap and hold. These didn't fail, so the menu doesn't come up. And then you can hit retry. It'll say like max transmission retries reached or something like that. Now, if it says that, that doesn't necessarily mean the message hasn't gone through there. I think that was earlier in the video, where it'll appear to not have sent, but it actually did. Another idiosyncrasy with meshtastic and the way the flood routing works. But it is cool, and I think this app was originally designed for iOS. It seems a lot more polished on here, but it's nice that it actually tells you out loud. And then you can see here, that's from Cheese Doodles. I don't think... Can we tap on this and get info? Message details, you can tap back, which is like a reply basically with an emoji. Message details. Man, it just gives you some basic info. But over here on the Android side, if we tap and hold... Actually, I think you just tap. Yeah, you just tap on it, and then you get that node's information for whoever sent it, which is kind of cool. iOS doesn't have that. But anyways, so yeah, that's the trick, changing the frequency slot to 20. Now, you can have multiple secured channels before your long fast channel. The entire system, when you change that frequency slot, the whole thing is going to operate on the frequency slot 20. So we could have like 3 secured private channels and then long fast. Or long fast could be the second one, and then we have more secured channels after that. It doesn't matter where it is in the queue. Now, this is where it gets confusing. You can see here that the list has reordered itself, but on Android, if we look over here, we can see 0 is your primary, and then long fast is 1. So this seems to change its order sometimes, but anyways, let's move on. Now, see, it was delivered, but it still says waiting to be acknowledged. That's this particular area I'm in, there's a bunch of people with repeaters that are kind of screwing everything up. Another reason I'm not using meshtastic in this particular location. But now on the iPhone, if you want to actually share your location on this secrets channel, you want to go into settings and then channels, secrets, make sure positions are enabled. Then we'll go back into settings and then go to position. And then you can set up a broadcast interval where it does it every 15 minutes automatically, or you can have it only transmit if you've moved more than 100 meters or something like that. And device GPS, which this thing does not have, so it says not present. But you can send another of other things too, like altitude, number of satellites, vehicle speed, heading, all that stuff. Once we get that saved, we'll back out of here. Then we're going to go up to the top to where it says app settings. This is specific for iPhone. So app settings, and then open settings. And that's going to go to the meshtastic settings in your phone. Then you can go location. While I use the app, you can say it's precise. And then scroll down here. We'll share your GPS location with your node. So we can turn that on. And you can set the interval that your phone sends the information to the meshtastic app. And then the meshtastic app has another interval. So if those don't necessarily line up, it may be a lot longer before the information goes out. But if you have this set up to grab your position too often, it's going to affect your phone battery. So I think what I've done in the past is like every 5 minutes, it'll report the phone's location to the app. And then the app remembers that, and it uses its own timer. Like, say the app is set up to send your location every minute, but your phone only gives it to the app every 5 minutes. It's only going to update every 5. So anyways, we go back to meshtastic now, and then that should be all set up. Actually, let's make sure the Android is set up as well. I'm trying to remember how this works on the Android. So we'll go into our node. Oh, it's right here on this screen. Provide phone location to mesh. I didn't even see it. Okay, provide phone location to mesh. All right, so let's go back over here to the nodes. We've got Cheese Doodles. Now I can hit node map, and I'm probably not going to show this, but yeah, there it is. It pops up on the map now. Okay, Once again, like I was saying earlier, that one setting, frequency slot 20, if you're in America, you got to set that, otherwise it won't work. Now these things can fully communicate. We can exchange positions. So if we go into super awesome thing, I believe we should have exchange position. Okay, that updated. And there we go. Map shows up on this one, and they're both communicating now and sending their location data back and forth using the location services or the GPS in the phone itself. Okay, moving on here. There are other devices which are standalone. There's the, who makes it? LilyGo T-Deck. This is a T-Deck Pro, which is different. But the LilyGo T-Deck is a standalone device that has a keyboard and antenna sticking out of it usually. It's a lot bigger than this, has a color screen and all that. Those devices you can set up, they have a keyboard on them, and you can message back and forth. They have their own little interface and operating system. Those things are pretty cool. I wanted to play with one of these, though, which has an e-paper display. And these are technically supported with meshtastic now, but they're kind of useless. If we look at this guy over here, if you put the newest firmware on this for alpha, it has a weird little navigation thing where you can kind of go through and then tap and hold to do different things, and you can see messages. And it's not very intuitive. Like, yeah, you could read messages on here, and you can set up preset messages to reply with by pressing and holding and doing all this weirdness. Well, this thing was kind of the same way when I tried it. Right now, I have it set up on MeshCORE. I'm going to shut this thing down real quick, and I'm going to pull out my micro SD card so I don't lose my configuration. You have to be very careful with the micro SD card tray on these, because it breaks really easily. Okay, I'm just going to pull that out and set it to the side. So what we're going to do is flash the meshtastic firmware onto this thing, and I'll show you how on this device it's still kind of pointless. So let's plug it into the computer. There we go. It's going to boot into MeshCORE, but we can ignore that. It'll give us an error. Back over here on the computer, we're going to refresh this again, select our target device, and this is made by LilyGo, and it's the T-Deck Pro. They also have this cool pager thing, but yeah, the regular T-Deck is pretty sweet. I want to get one of those at some point. So we're going to go into this thing, we're going to do, hell, let's do the newest firmware. Then we'll hit flash. I don't remember how this works. Oh yeah, it is ESP32 base, so we have to do a full erase because we're coming from a completely different operating system. Sure, our micro SD card's out. Yes, it is. And USB JTAG serial, connect. And I don't know if the screen is going to change on that thing or not. Erasing flash, this may take a while. Yeah, it hasn't changed yet. So we're going to let this run for a little while, and hopefully I can show you the problem with it, where it makes it kind of pointless. Okay, flashing is complete. Let's go over here. I kind of burned in the corner of the screen on this e-paper display. I'm slowly fixing that. But it says meshtastic, click to navigate and long press to select. So our touchscreen is literally akin to simply pressing the button where to go. So if you notice here, we've got OK and got it. Every time you tap on the screen, it just toggles. So it's like pressing this button. The actual area you touch doesn't matter. So we'll long press to say OK. And then you'd think you can tap on a region, but no, it's just scrolling through the list every time you tap. And now I've got to go through this entire list, but oh, I selected a random one. Okay, so now it's rebooting. The reason this is pointless is because this still works over Bluetooth just like this. To do anything useful, you have to pair it to your phone. So if you're going to have this device with a keyboard, you would think you can like enter messages and do stuff, but nah, it's basically the same as this. I mean, you can kind of enter messages. This is an updated firmware, so let's play with it a little bit and give it the benefit of the doubt here, but okay, so that is basically the exact same display as this, same layout and everything. And when you tap, it just goes along to the next option on the bottom. So if we go over to settings, for example, you can tap and hold, and it's exactly the same as use the new firmware on this thing. And it... Okay, let's try and type a message. So we had to go back around to, I think that's message. There we go, messages. So let's try and type a message. New freehand text message. Oh. Tap and hold. Hello. Okay, and then I think you tap and hold. Oh, and then it sends it. So the firmware is basically the same as this. If you get out your phone, it'll do all the same stuff, but the touchscreen is literally just emulating a single button. So anyways, MeshCORE on this thing is sweet. It actually works. Delivery failed. Okay, well, we're on the wrong frequency slot anyways here, but anyways, here, I'm going to flash it back to MeshCORE real quick just to show you. Hang on. All right, here we are on the MeshCORE flasher. So TDEC Pro, that's the one we want. Client GUI with data on SD card. So this is cool because as soon as I put my micro SD card back in, all my settings are going to come back. So let's hit flash. My SD card currently is not in it, but flashing failed. Did you place it in a DFU mode? Oh, I think... Hang on, I think I have to... I forget how to put the thing in DFU mode. I just hit the reset button on it. Let's retry. Flash. Connect. Okay, there we go. Now it's working. Being an ESP32, it does have two buttons. One on the side is the lock button, and the other one is the reset button. Okay, so that thing, it says it's resetting. There we go, we're back to MeshCORE. It's going to give us an error about not having data, but that's fine. So we'll shut down. Now the cool thing with this is they wrote the firmware in such a way that pressing no buttons will turn it back on, including the reset button, until you connect it to power. That's cool. Anyways, let me get our micro SD card back in here. Then we just plug it into power long enough to get it to turn on. There we go. And we can enter for skip on GPS. Here's all of our stuff. If we go into settings, we've got an actual UI here, and you can scroll on the screen. If we go into security, we can select an option there. There's a back arrow, and we can change our networks and all kinds of stuff. If we go into the public channel, for example, the interface looks a little weird, but you can send messages, test, and then hit enter, and that goes through. Oh, look at that. It went through. My chair node is now MeshCORE. But anyways, MeshCORE is a little different because it's... Now, I might be wrong on this, but I don't think it's open source, but there's paid developers working on it. And like I said, unless you're in Seattle or Portland, there isn't really a reason to switch to it right now. It is slowly growing, but it fixes a lot of the problems with meshtastic, which I haven't really covered a lot in this video. Also, the apps on Android and iOS are exactly the same. So we have, congruency for that. Actually, hang on. So MeshCORE on here, MeshCORE on here, they're identical. And even if you use the web interface through Web Serial, the web interface mimics the app. So anyways, that's a whole skier versus snowboarders topic, in my opinion. But anyways, as far as meshtastic goes, this thing is not what you want. The TDEC, the regular TDEC, I don't have one, but I've seen a lot of videos on people using them, and those look really cool. Proper standalone device. Now I hit lock on here, and it's got a lock screen. I'm not going to show, this is a Seed Studio Sense Cap Tracker. I think it's a T1000E. I'm not going to show how to flash this because every time you flash it, it erases everything on it. It is kind of cool though. It's completely sealed and it uses this weird little proprietary magnetic cable to charge. You might think, proprietary cables. These are $1.50 if you want to buy spares, so that's not bad. But to get these things into the DFU mode, you have to start the flasher and then kind of disconnect this twice quickly like this. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 times, but basically just like that, and it puts it into the DFU mode. But again, every time you flash these, it completely erases everything in it. But this has a proper GPS in it, which is cool. This thing's actually still on meshtastic. I still keep an eye on the network and still talk to a few people on it here and there, but it's not super usable in this area because of people. But anyways, so there's another device. Oh, let me go grab that node I have outside real quick. I'm gonna go fetch that thing and show you what a solar node looks like that I've set up for MeshCORE. I actually need to check on it anyways because it's been raining and I'm not sure I waterproofed it properly. All right, this started out to be, well, it was going to be a covert solar node, but then the solar panels I bought were a little bit bigger than the top of the box. And I wanted to see if one of these little rack modules here could maintain and run with a single 5 volt, 200 milliamp solar panel. And this was kind of the test. Like I said, I put it in the worst possible conditions. It's been out there for about 3 days. It's only been sunny for about a day and a half. Right now the battery is at 78% or 3.94 volts. And you can actually get that information through the mesh, as it were. But let me open this up and show you what we got going on here. I've just got a couple of little magnetic feet on it. But I was attempting to use the little internal antenna inside this thing, but then I realized one of these works significantly better. So I just drilled a hole and put it through that way and stuck the solar panel on there. But anyhow, let's get this thing open. This particular conduit box was not designed to be opened and closed multiple times, the way the seal on it works. Okay, looks like we're good. But we've got one of these little rack modules on one of these carrier boards I printed. I think you can see that down inside there. And we've got a single 18650 and a battery holder here. And our solar panel comes in through the top there, plugs into the rack module, and keeps it charged. Well, anyways, the ambient light outside is just barely enough to get this thing to charge a tiny bit. But yeah, this is just kind of a test I was working on. But things like this are pretty cool. And I'm trying to get MeshCORE extended more in this area. And there's one spot I can't quite get signal to. So I built this thing. And that's the reason I have this giant funny looking stick with the Heltec V3 on it and this giant antenna. I've actually been wandering around town like this, staring at my phone, checking signal strength in various areas. And I found a few spots that I think will work. Now I'm going to say the word repeater. MeshCORE is significantly different than meshtastic, but trying to find a good spot to put a repeater. So anyways, that's an example of kind of a remote deployment you can do. You can build these a lot smaller. They have versions of these modules where it's just this part and you don't have the rest of this. And you can make them in a really small container. But I think in this particular case, it's going to take 2 of these solar panels to keep it running 24/7 in you know, kind of inclement, not sunny weather and all that. This particular box doesn't have room for 2 of them on the top. I mean, like I said, I originally started trying to make this into a covert node where it's just attached to a pole or something somewhere and just looks like a nondescript utility box so that no one will mess with it. But then I wound up putting the antenna out the top and that kind of gives it away. And then if I'm going to put another solar panel on it, it would probably have to be on the front or one of the sides, which makes it look a lot more like a thing that's not supposed to be there. So anyways, just kind of a cool project there. Oh, and I've just got a couple rubber coated magnet feet on it because where this was sitting was on top of a giant metal utility box anyways. So anyhow, and also for testing purposes, I've built up little things like this as well. This is one of those little 18650 battery UPS modules that you can put an output on. And I just zip tie one of the nodes to this with a little antenna. And I'll throw this in a bush or something for an afternoon just to kind of do some testing, move it to another location and whatever. But yeah, it's some pretty cool nerd stuff, I will have to say. It's a hobby that will occupy weeks and months of your time if you're not careful. Well, yeah, there you go. I think there's probably stuff I haven't covered. I think we've gone over the basics on how to flash these and how to set up the channels so that you don't accidentally send out your location data. Or if you do want to share it, you can do it securely. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to put links to a lot of resources and information and some different products there. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but oh, well, I guess I might as well show you this thing I have here on the wall. So this is one of my MeshCORE nodes right now. Ignore the angle of this antenna. There's kind of an odd reason it's like that, but I have one of those rack modules there on the wall, and then this big ol' 8.9 or I don't know, it's a pretty high gain antenna, and that is actually a real antenna as opposed to these little Amazon ones. This is a Rockland antenna. If you know anything about those, yeah. But anyways, that's one of the things I got set up there. And then also in my chair, I have another one of these heltec V3 nodes. I'll paste some pictures on screen of that, but this little rubber duck antenna right here actually does pretty good. I've actually been able to hit stuff over a mile away just with this, which is kind of insane. I don't have a lot of room to put one of the bigger antennas on there, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd probably do that, like one of these. And I could potentially relocate the antenna to the back of the chair, but it's best to have your antenna cables as short as possible. But I have this set up here on one of these switches, and it links to my phone. But that's one of the benefits of having a power chair, is you have room for accessories like that, and kind of unlimited power for small, low-powered devices, so kind of cool. I see myself upgrading that to one of the rack modules at some point, and actually getting some good coax and running the antenna to the back of the chair, so I can get a little bit more range. But for right now, the idea with this is, the way MeshCORE works is based on repeaters. And repeaters you can't connect to your phone and view messages with. So I'm usually within range of one of the 3 repeaters that's in a 10-mile radius around here, close enough so that my chair can pick up the signals, and then that goes right to my phone. So kind of a cool way of doing that. And it worked for meshtastic also, you know, as I'm driving around, because meshtastic is huge in Portland and all over the place. Like, I could drive 45 miles from here and still be able to send messages back and forth. That is a limitation I should mention with meshtastic, is the number of hops and network congestion and people improperly using repeaters and stuff like that. Again, with meshtastic, repeaters are bad in congested areas. There's a very small use case for them, and if you use one improperly, it makes it so that the network just gets completely congested and messages don't go through. But you have that maximum hop limit of 6. With MeshCORE, in theory, the default is 64 hops, and there are people picking up messages from Portland and regularly talking to people in Seattle and all the way down to like Eugene, Oregon. The one repeater I have on the hill is able to hit one of the repeaters that's 25 miles away. So it's pretty interesting what you can do with low power devices like this, proper antennas, and chirp spread spectrum is kind of the secret, I guess, as it were. But it's kind of magical at 915 megahertz what you can actually accomplish. So anyways, again, if you have questions, put them down below, and we're going to wrap this up. I think this is getting kind of long. So anyways, thanks for watching. This was not a normal video for me, but it's raining outside today, and I needed to do this anyways. So I'll see you tomorrow on the live stream. Thanks for watching.